Well, hi, Leah, and welcome to the Rebuilding My Health Radio podcast. I'm excited to have you here today to talk about your health journey.
Casey, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here and to go a little bit deeper with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I met you in an event a month or so back and heard your story and was kind of floored by just the dramatic health event that basically happened in your life at a very young age. So let's kind of go back to that because it really kind of changed the course of your life. So kind of tell us what happened at that time.
Yeah, I would be happy to. So everything started at a pretty young age. The major event happened at 16 years old, but I want to go back a little bit before that because there were many years, for many years, I should say, I was complaining about chronic symptoms and they were moving around. I remember at first it started with like this chronic like uterine pain that I was experiencing in my like sex organs. And then I remember these chronic headaches I was having. And then all of a sudden things started shifting into my gut and started noticing like really big problems with digesting. I was having a lot of chronic pain in my abdomen. I remember so many vivid memories of me as a young girl, like just curled around the toilet and just
Oh,
really struggling with like what was happening in my body. And I grew up in a pretty emotionally stressful household. My parents eventually divorced, but for a really long time, there was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of emotional turmoil, a lot of yelling. And I never fully received the emotional support that I needed as a child because my parents were really consumed by their own experience. And I don't blame them for that. They did the best they could and they kept me safe. And there was always food and shelter. And,
mm,
I'm so grateful for the way my parents took care of me. But it did lead to a lot of the experiences that I was having. For anyone that is listening and is familiar with the effects of trauma on the human body, your body remembers everything. And
mhm.
physiologically, trauma changes the way that your body functions. When you're in a stress response, all of your organs function differently, all of your cells react differently. And it often, when not tended to, will lead to chronic health challenges. And that is what happened to me. And shortly before 16, when those severe symptoms started, I want to say it was maybe around age 12 or 13. And I remember it was shortly after receiving the Gardasil vaccine as a young girl that all of my symptoms started.
Wow.
And one of the things that I want to reiterate here is by no means am I an anti-vaxxer. I am a supporter of vaccines and I'm a supporter of healthy and clean vaccines and a healthy vaccination schedule. And unfortunately, we don't have that in our world today, which can make things challenging when a child receives a vaccine and receives maybe an overload of toxins and chemicals that are oftentimes mixed into that vaccine. But it's not necessarily that is the problem. It is mixing that into an environment that is already filled with stress and anxiety and emotional dysregulation. And ultimately it creates an environment where things can start to go wrong. And that's unfortunately what happened to me. And so I want to say that one of the number one side effect of the Gardasil vaccine, I was one of the first women to receive that vaccine as a young girl. The number one side effect is pancreatitis, which is inflammation of the pancreas. And as things started to progress and things started to get worse, I was constantly complaining. My mom took me to the doctor. I saw all these different specialists, took all these different tests. I was poked and prodded and eventually no one could really figure it out. And they didn't know how to help me. And so, I'm this child. It's like there's something wrong. I am hunched over a toilet, sleeping through the night at the foot of the toilet. And people are telling me that there's nothing wrong. Like, you're wrong. Like, and
Yeah.
so, That was really challenging for me. And it's something that I've worked through throughout my life, has been this aspect of like being heard and being seen, because as a child, I wasn't. And so that's a
Mhm.
shadow that's come up for me through my life. But what ended up happening was at age 16, I was visiting a boyfriend at the time up in UMass Amherst. And it was, I'll remember this night forever. It was Halloween. And I remember sitting in a chair at the end of the night, and all of a sudden it felt like someone came over and jabbed a knife into my gut. And I keeled over and I fell onto the floor and was just in severe pain. And I'm used to, at this point, I had been used to having a lot of GI pain. And so I was like, I'm fine. I'm going to sleep it off. It'll be fine. So I went back to his dorm room and tried to sleep through the night and just couldn't. I was in this agonizing pain all night long, tossing and turning. Fast forward a little bit, I end up getting taken to the emergency room, and I was given a CAT scan, and come to find out I was experiencing internal bleeding. And they couldn't really, could tell me that there was a mass on my pancreas, but they couldn't really tell me exactly like what it was or what was happening. So they ended up getting the bleeding under control. To be honest, I don't remember how they did that. I think it was some sort of medication or something. I don't fully remember. There was, when you're in that much pain and your body's in that amount of stress, it massively influences the memory, your memory, I should say, and can make things foggy and almost like there's like holes in your memory.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And so I, a week later, ended up going to a specialist at Mass General Hospital. And this is where I'd seen all my doctors, which is one of the top hospitals in the world. And I walk in and he looks at my CAT scan at the images. And the first thing he says when he walks into the room is, "You have a tumor. You need surgery." And me and my mom are sitting there and we're like,
Oh, no.
"Oh, what? Okay."
No bedside manner there.
Yeah, he just went right in for it. And yeah, so about a week or two later, I was in the hospital preparing for major abdominal surgery. And so they went in and needed to take the tumor off of my pancreas. It was on the tail of my pancreas. And because they didn't know if it was malignant or benign at the time, they needed to completely open me up. It couldn't be laparoscopic or microscopic because
Mm.
they needed to keep the mass intact to prevent spreading of the cells. And so what was hard was that nobody really educated me and told me what to expect. And I'm the 16-year-old girl and I'm like, okay, I've had surgery before. Like, I'm going in. I've done this before.
Mhm.
What I didn't expect was to wake up on the other side of surgery, not being able to move my body at all. And, the reason for that is because they cut through every major muscle of my abdominal cavity from my sternum to my belly button and had to move all of my organs around to get to your pancreas, which is in the back of the body.
Mhm.
So I woke up pretty much paralyzed and not able to move and in severe pain. And that was the start of a really challenging journey for me. And, it it opened my eyes over time to the fact that the Western medical system is not built for chronic healthcare in no way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And over the years that came after that, actually about a year in, I found myself at college suffering from severe anxiety, severe depression, like debilitating. And I was finding myself awake at 5:30 every morning, getting to the gym and sprinting on the treadmill for about an hour to try to like regulate what was happening in my body. Because it was the only way that I could like try to like bring any sense of calm to what my body was experiencing. And, that led to me being given anxiety and depression medications. I was put on SSRIs and was given Clonopin. And instead of being taught how to manage and handle the emotional dysregulation I was experiencing, which I equate to the trauma that was unprocessed in my body, which also played a role in the development of the tumor, and also to the disrupted gut health and the gut flora that occurred due to the surgery. And, people don't talk in the hospital about the connection between the gut and the brain. And when the gut is disrupted, it disrupts the brain significantly. Vice versa. When the brain is disrupted in any type of like traumatic brain injury, the gut is massively disrupted as well.
Mhm.
And so that gut brain axis was like really, really disrupted for me. And nobody explained this to me. And I didn't come to find this out until years later in college when I found myself in a different program at a different school and started to understand this mind body connection. And yeah, it was a really challenging journey for me and really eye-opening to see how poorly the Western medical system is built to support someone that is experiencing chronic health symptoms, chronic pain, chronic mental and emotional challenges. And that event completely changed my life because it put me on this path of becoming a more empowered self-healer and taking responsibility for my own mind, my own body, my own mental, physical, emotional health and well-being.
Mhm.
Because I got to the point after being handed all these band-aids and all these pills and all these things that are like, here, treat the symptom, that I was like, I'm done with this. I need to figure out how to support myself, how to help my body, which is very clearly yelling and screaming at me. And these things that Western medicine is giving and handing to me, they're not helping. It's not doing
Mhm.
it. And that's really when I set out to learn all of the things that I have so I'm so grateful that I've found to support my health and my wellness, my healing, and that I now get to give back to others that come to me for the same support.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I love, that you've kind of come full circle with all that through, everything that you have been through, all the lessons that you have learned to now be able to, give that back, to others and, help them, maybe, yeah, not suffer in the way you did or, find solutions faster than you did. Um, so Leah, I guess, like what was the turning point that kind of led you to look at alternative approaches and kind of, what were some of the first things that you found that really helped you?
Yeah. I'm laughing because it's kind of a funny story. In the moment, it didn't feel so funny. Um, but my turning point was the day I broke a flat screen TV. And I know, yes. So I was living with a friend at the time, and I will never forget this moment. I was mortified and upset at the same time. I had just gotten off of a phone call with some of my family. I was on speakerphone, and I remember getting off the phone call, and I can't even remember like what we discussed on the phone call, but I remember being so enraged and just triggered. And all of the trauma that was still undealt with at the time was just, it was poked. And I got so angry that I screamed. I chucked my iPhone at the floor, and it ricocheted off the floor and smashed the flat screen TV that was sitting on the table.
Oh no.
And that one just got me. I just like fell to the floor, burst into tears crying. It wasn't my TV. So I'm like, I'm a personal trainer. How am I supposed to even afford to replace this flat screen TV? And I was just ashamed. And it was that moment where I like looked at myself and was like, what did I just do? Like, I literally can't blame and point a finger at anyone else other than myself. That was my behavior. That was my choice to throw my phone. And look what happened.
Mhm.
And that was really the turning point for me. And the first thing that I started to do is take a really hard look at my mind, at my mindset. And I was so stuck in this victim mentality and this poor me mentality. And yeah, like I'd been through some tough things, and that victim mentality really continues to blame others and doesn't lead
Mhm.
me to take back my power and take responsibility for me and for my choices and for where I was at in life. And that was when I started looking at my mind, looking at my thoughts, looking at my mindset. And I realized that I had taken on a lot of negative mindset qualities. And yeah, it was leading me to suffer. It was leading me to suffer a lot. And I remember I was dating someone at the time, and he had come over. I don't remember if it was that day or a couple of days later. And I sat on the couch and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and cried and cried and cried. And I was in this victim mindset. And he sat there with me for 3 hours on that couch, which I then slowly like melted to the floor. And he sat with me while I laid on the floor and I cried for 3 hours. And he sat with me until I agreed to stand up on my feet and put my hands on my hips and say, I am powerful.
Wow. He kind of coached you through that?
He did.
Wow. Yeah, what a friend to have at that time.
It was it was something that I don't know how I could ever repay him for that moment,
Yeah,
because
that's
he
powerful. Yeah.
it was, and it was the patience that he had to help me get there, because he saw it in me. He saw what I was capable of. He saw my power, and he allowed me the space to work through that darkness and
Mhm.
come to the other side of it. Um,
Wow.
so those were that period of my life, like that week was the turning point for me, and realizing like I
Mhm.
need change. I can make change,
Yeah,
and I can choose change.
you made me cry. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, yeah, what an incredible turning point. Yeah, yeah. So then, yeah, from there, from that place of feeling more powerful and in control, what steps did you take?
Yeah, there was a lot of steps I took, and it happened over a couple of years. The first thing that I looked at was my relationship with my health and with my movement. Um, Prior to that experience of this man encouraging me to stand in a power pose and claim my power, I thought that that strength and that power was at the time coming from a bodybuilding show that I was in. This is about a year before this experience. And I entered into this bodybuilding show because, one, bodybuilding and exercising had become my regulation tool before I understood what regulation tools were. I
Mhm.
went to the gym, I put everything I had into that hour and a half at the gym, and I left. And it wasn't out for me. And it wasn't necessarily the healthiest out. And many people that I worked with in college will tell you that. And they saw it in me before I could see it in myself. And so I ended up enrolling in a bodybuilding competition because I thought that that's how I was going to feel strong and feel powerful. And it was at the time that Instagram was really popping off, and you were seeing all these fit, beautiful women on Instagram. And I was like, that's what's going to make me happy. And it was this external validation that I was really seeking. And although it wasn't a great experience for me, it taught me a lot. I thought that that experience was going to connect me with my mind and my body, and it actually did the opposite. It completely disconnected me from my mind and my body.
Mm.
And um, it also taught me and showed me what I'm capable of when I commit myself to something and when I devote myself to something.
Mhm.
And so when I got to this place of recognizing my power and my strength from the inside and not from the outside, I remembered the ability that I had to create change in my physical body on the outside. I mean, I went from 20 something percent body fat, like 25% body fat around there, to like 10% body fat as a woman. It was
Oh,
insane. Yeah. Not healthy and not something I would recommend. I think that the bodybuilding world is in my opinion, and through my experience, a very toxic place to be. And I also understand why people want to be there, because I've been there, right?
mhm.
And so I remembered what I was capable of through that show, and I remembered the work and the dedication that I put in to accomplish this goal that led me to experience something different. And that reminded me what I was capable of doing and doing for my mind. And there was a really big event that happened for me that this is also a pretty significant turning point for me, but it was a turning point in a different way. And this came right after my bodybuilding show. So this was still shortly before I found my inner power and my inner strength. I finished my bodybuilding show, and it really disrupted my physical and mental and emotional health. And at that point in time, I immediately went up to Canada and spent a weekend in Toronto. And I remember spending the weekend on a hotel room floor. And I could not stop eating chocolate. I could not stop filling my body with junk food because it was the only place I was getting this dopamine fix. And I was miserable. I was sobbing, I was crying. And that entire weekend I sat on the floor eating junk food, thinking about jumping off the side of the building and killing myself. And I just couldn't fathom like how I was in that place. Like, how could I put in all this work? How could I look so incredible on the outside and feel so terrible on the inside and not want to be here anymore?
Mm.
And this moment of again reminding me of my power, I had a choice. I could have ended my life that day, and I chose not to. And instead, I put all of the junk food in a plastic bag, and I put my shoes on, and I walked downstairs, and I walked up to a homeless man that was sitting on the side of the road, and I handed him this massive bag of chocolate and junk food. And I walked back up to the hotel room, and I just sat there and I cried. And I cried until I chose to put my shoes on and go back and sit in the gym and be with my being, be with the experience that I had just moved through. And so there were these moments of like reminding myself of my power throughout this journey. But when I got to that place where my ex sat with me on the floor and made me stand up and recognize the power and strength that I had within me and helped me pull that outwardly, that was when I really made some really big change in my world.
Um,
And so that led me to start to shift my relationship with my physical health. For a long time, exercise meant going to the gym and working as hard as you possibly could, leaving it all at the door and then going home. And I had to shift. I got to shift my relationship to to transform the word exercise into movement and realize how much benefit was actually in movement in general, and that movement didn't have to be throwing kettlebells around like a crazy woman and doing all these things to, have a high intensity workout. Movement could be going to the gym and walking on the treadmill because that's all I had energy for in the day.
mhm,
Movement
mhm,
could be learning about my body through mobility. Movement could be so many things, and it allowed me to transform my relationship with exercise to be a much healthier experience. And then I started looking at the food I was putting in my body, observing what I was putting into my body during the bodybuilding show, and looking at, why am I in so much physical pain right now? Why does my back hurt so bad? And I started to understand and research how hormones play a role in your physiology, how eating meat that's not organic and grass fed influences my body's ability to heal. I started looking at additives and colors and dyes that are put into foods. I started looking at GMOs and other herbicides and pesticides. I started looking at sulfates and sulfites. I started looking at the toxins and chemicals that I was finding in my makeup. All of these things play a role in the toxic load on your body. And when that your body can no longer support and handle that toxic load, that's when you start to experience chronic pain, chronic inflammation, chronic mental health challenges, all of these things. And one by one, I started going through and working on these things until I got to the point where I found mindfulness and meditation, because my anxiety had just gotten too much. I couldn't handle it anymore. Couldn't handle the depression. And even though my body was getting more physically healthy, I knew that my mind was really suffering. And I would say, out of everything that I've ever done, mindfulness and meditation has been the number one most important component. I believe that your mental health drives every other aspect of your health in your life. And you
Mhm.
can do as much as you possibly want to do to your physical health. You can use all the biohacking tools in the world. And if you're not looking at your mental health, if you're not looking at your stress and the trauma that you've experienced in your past, those physical symptoms and that physical expression of discomfort in your body, that is going to continue. And
Mhm.
so I started sitting. I started sitting in silence and I started listening. And that journey led me down a path of really diving deep into trauma work, into parts work, into shadow work, into really looking at these areas in my nervous system, in my brain, in my neuroplasticity that were not supporting me in the experience that I wanted. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of different tools I've used over the years for many different reasons. But if I had to choose one that made the biggest impact on my life, that that I am so passionate about sharing with the world, it would be mindfulness and
Mhm.
meditation. And I had this moment a couple years back as I was getting off a call with a client and really diving deep into what this means for them and how this can change their life, where I thought, could you imagine what would happen if every child on the planet understood and could implement these mindfulness, meditation, and connection to breath, could implement these practices into their daily life? I remember back to my childhood, and I stood up every single day and reiterated the Pledge of Allegiance to a loudspeaker, right? And
Yeah.
had that time been used to help me connect with my breath and help me connect
Mhm.
with my body and help me learn to listen to my body, oh my God, I
Uh,
would not have found myself where I did as an adult, sitting on a building wanting to commit suicide,
yeah. Right.
you know?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Um, for sure. And it's so simple, really, when you think about it, something that you can do anytime, anywhere with just yourself. You don't need any tools. You don't need another person. You don't need to spend any money. There are tools, and people and all that can help you with this and kind of guide you through, but really so simple. And yeah, I wanted to mention that, like, We're in Colorado, and a lot of the schools here have mindfulness grants. I don't know if yeah, you've heard about this, but my son has been in a couple different schools that have mindfulness grants, and it's like, wow, they are, and then they have, moments throughout the day where they're allowed to, or given moments in the day where they can kind of, regulate and try these breathing practices or whatever. So things are changing. Hopefully that is going to become, more widespread. But
They are, and I agree with you. It does need to be more widespread. Like I come from the East Coast, and I know that on the East Coast, it's not as common there. I love the fact that Colorado is much more advanced in implementing things like this for health and wellness and well-being, and it's something that I believe needs to be implemented more seriously around the world.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. So, Leah, I'm curious. You know, mindfulness meditation have been super influential for you in terms of the trauma aspects, kind of that um, emotional and physical trauma, because you kind of have been through both. Were there specific modalities that helped you with that, or was it mainly meditation, or were there some other things that you would mention?
There's a couple of major things that helped me with this. The first one that I stumbled across was um, the emotion code.
Hmm.
And it is a modality that teaches you how to identify trapped emotions in your body and how to trace them back and learn, is this your emotion? Was this an emotion that was transferred to you from someone else? Was this a emotion that you inherited from your family somewhere down the line? There's many ways that emotions can become trapped in the body. And that started to bring up some questions for me as I started to find these emotions that were trapped at different ages from different people, emotions that weren't mine, that were my mother's. And I will never forget, as I was doing this one night, I stumbled across the emotion of unworthiness. And it was my mother's. It was, excuse me. Ooh, yeah. Funny how emotions do that to you, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I stumbled across this emotion of unworthiness that was transferred to me from my mother in the in I believe it was the first trimester of pregnancy. It was either the first or this during her pregnancy at some point in time. I can't remember the specific details here. And I called her and I asked her if this was something that she experienced. One of the important things to note here is that the place where this emotion was trapped was in my solar plexus.
Mm.
And my solar plexus is the area of my body that has a direct cut through it from my abdominal surgery. And so when I called my mom and I asked her this, I was like, "Hey, like, did you ever have this experience of feeling unworthy while you were pregnant with me?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, when I was pregnant with you, I felt extremely unworthy because your father never recognized that I was pregnant. He never put his hand on my belly. And that was like the
Mm.
specific thing that she said to me that just like lit this light bulb in my head where I was like, wow, like just that physical contact and recognition of me being in my belly that that correlates to exactly where my trauma is on my body really
Mhm.
made me like piqued my interest and led me to like look deeper. And that's when I started going deeper into trauma and understanding trauma's influence on the human body. I at that time picked up Bessel van der Kolk's book, The Body Keeps the Score. And that taught me so much about the influence of trauma. And there's many other books on trauma that I picked up along the way. But um, that was the first domino. And then I started understanding how the nervous system and how the body holds onto trauma through a modality called neurokinetic therapy and understanding how emotions actually play a role in your body's movement and your biomechanics. And so then I started getting into it from like the physical body realm. And then when I moved to California about 4 years ago now, I was introduced to a modality called the comprehensive resource model. And this is a form of therapy that completely changed my life. And
Mm.
it has allowed me to bring a sense of safety to these areas and experiences of trauma in my life that were still very activated in my body, in my physical body. And as I moved through these sessions with her, I think I just did one session a week, like went in really hard, really fast for about a year. And over the course of the year, as I navigated these trauma sessions with her, what I experienced in my physical healing just blew me out of the water. My GI symptoms shifted and changed. I started having a lot less pain. My back pain wasn't a problem anymore. Um, and it allowed me to really bring down regulation to these areas of my being that were upregulated from all that trauma that were leading to so many chronic symptoms. So I would say those are some of the main things that help me with the trauma. Obviously, there's other little things along the way, like somatic experiencing, like dancing and singing and expressing and writing and
Mhm.
journaling. There's so many
Mhm.
forms of self-expression that are really helpful
Mhm.
for moving trauma through the body. But in regards to like really healing the trauma and not just um moving the energy through, I would say those modalities were two of the most powerful ones. The comprehensive resource model you can't really do by yourself. You need someone to walk you through that. But the emotion code stuff, that is something that you can learn to do on your own. And so if you are interested in learning more about the emotion code, I would encourage you to get the book, The Emotion Code. And I would also encourage you to get a book called, I believe it's the Self Muscle Testing, or The Art of Self Muscle Testing, I believe is what the book is called. And it helps you start to understand how to use muscle testing, which I think is a tool that most people, if you're interested in
Mhm.
learning what your body needs to heal, I think it's a really great tool to have. But it helps you learn what can influence muscle testing, and how to get the most accurate results through your testing. So
Mm. Very interesting. I'll have to check out both of those. Muscle testing has always kind of fascinated me. So I don't think I even really realized you can kind of self muscle test accurately. So I will have to check that out, and we'll definitely link those in the show notes. So I appreciate all of those recommendations. So Leah, basically, it sounds like as you're doing each of these things, your pain is decreasing, your anxiety and depression were easing, your gut symptoms, um, such and how's your health today?
my health today is doing really well. I've learned how to communicate with my body, which is such an important thing to learn as you're navigating any healing journey, how to listen and how to respond to your body. And that's something that
Mhm.
I feel I've mastered. And, I still have moments where all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Okay, let's tune in and listen, because clearly I didn't listen to the small whispers that led me here. Right. And yeah, it's being able to respond appropriately to what your body needs. But if you're not listening to it, you can't. And so now I know what foods upset my gut. I know what to avoid. I know what my body needs. I know what supplements are most supportive from my body. Most recently, I started using a supplement, um, because I was noticing that there was some like really odd things happening for me. I was noticing that I was having like really bad body odor, and I was like, why do I smell like I'm literally so healthy? Like, this is weird. And I sit in saunas and I'm like, okay, odd. And I reached out to a friend who does uses a form of frequency therapy to help get feedback as to what's happening in the body, what the body needs, what it's doing, what it's not doing. And came to find out that bile was not flowing well through my body. And when I had a conversation with her, she was like, honestly, like, I don't actually ever like see, I've never seen these things pop up on the scan before. And I and we talked about it more. And she's like, I also never have worked with someone that is missing part of their pancreas. And so there are things that I have had to learn about my body that nobody else really could have told me without me doing investigation. I wouldn't have
Mhm.
figured out because my body is very different than the average person. And, that's not something to be discouraged about. I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to recognize that your homeostasis, when you have some type of chronic challenge or chronic symptom, or you've had an organ removed, or you've had a major injury, I think it's really important to recognize that your homeostasis is going to be different than someone else's. And it's
Mhm.
a matter of learning, what does your body need to be in that homeostasis?
Mhm.
And that's where I really love supporting people through their journey of healing and helping them learn how to communicate, how to deliver and cater to their needs. And yeah, I'm very grateful that today I have a very healthy, very well functioning body. I don't have back pain. I won't go deeply into this, but because of a lot of the GI stuff that I was navigating in the past, I did end up herniating 3 discs in my lumbar spine at age 23. And
Mm.
so needed to learn also like how to rehab my physical body to give it what it needed to strengthen functionally in a way that I wasn't hurting myself. So
Mhm.
now I know how to listen to my body when I go into the gym. I know how to listen to my mind and sit in meditation or get out in nature and put my feet on the ground. I know when my body tells me that it needs this supplement or that supplement or this food or that food. And if I'm confused and I don't know, I ask and I muscle test.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Um, yeah, it's such a process, right? Learning your own body and learning, as you said, kind of where that homeostasis is and recalibrating every day, like, oh, I need to do more of this, less of that, and really figuring it out. So Leah, this like all of this kind of changed the course of your life, and now you're helping other people, um, particularly with well their health and with mind body practices. So tell us more about what you're doing.
Yeah, so I am a mind body healing guide. And I am a mind body healing guide. My cat entered the room.
You're
And
right.
so I'm a mind body healing guide. And what I do is I help people feel more empowered and more confident in being able to step into their self healing abilities. I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed by physical pain, mental pain, emotional pain. I know what it's like for your trauma to run your life. And I understand that society is really not built to support us with healing ourselves. And it's not their fault. They don't know. Doctors aren't taught these things. And this is where, in my opinion, I believe that people get to step into radical responsibility and where they get to take ownership of what they can do for themselves and how they can do it for themselves. And so people come to me navigating physical pain, people come to me navigating healing their trauma, people come to me navigating the mindset, emotional, and mental component of their journey. And I meet them where they're at and I help them learn how to communicate with their bodies. I help them learn how to put tools into their toolkit and I help them learn how to gain confidence and be more effective with choosing the right tool when they need it so that they can feel again more empowered over their ability to support themselves.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, and you were doing this with people globally, is that correct? Not just local.
I am, yes. So
Yeah,
I
remotely.
work remotely with people online. I do one-on-one coaching. I have a couple of different group programs I run. The most well-known is called the Mind Body Initiative. It's a 16-week group program that helps you dive really deep into all of these components of your physical, mental, emotional, and energetic well-being. And then I also do some consulting for businesses and some speaking engagements as well.
Wow. Yeah, very cool. And you have a freebie, which we will definitely link in the show notes, a mind body daily check in and guide that I know will be helpful for people. I'm going to check it out myself. Well, Leah, it's kind of a wrap up question. What advice would you pass on to others? What do you want people to know after what you've been through?
Hmm. I want people to know that regardless of where they are on their healing journey, regardless of what diagnosis they've been given, regardless of what words have been used to describe their experience, you can always choose to shift your experience. And those words don't define you. Regardless of where you are in your journey, you can always heal. And when you start to make these choices to create change, you can shift your experience. And so I personally really don't believe in diagnoses. I think that they're I just don't believe in them at all. Um
Mhm.
because that puts you in a box. And the moment that you find yourself in a box is the moment that you usually find yourself trapped there.
Mhm.
And so, wherever you are in your journey, just know that you can create change in your experience, and your body has the innate ability to heal as long as you listen and give it the resources that it needs to do so.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely true. That's what truth that I have seen. Um, Absolutely. Well, Leah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your beautiful story and all of the things that you've learned as a result of it. And I know it will touch people and reach those who need it. So thanks so much.
Yeah, Casey, thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure. I appreciate
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. Likewise.